As the number of coronavirus cases worldwide is on the verge of hitting 5 million, leading voices in the media are calling on leaders to implement a policy of herd immunity. Here with us to discuss this issue is World Socialist website writer Andre Damon. Andre, what is herd immunity?
Well, Zach, within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, the policy of herd immunity is simply shorthand for letting the disease run rampant throughout broad sections of the population, allowing hundreds of millions or even billions of people to become infected and millions of people to die. Over the course of the past several weeks, articles in the New York Times by Thomas Friedman, as well as Foreign Affairs, and most recently, an editorial in the Washington Post, have sought to normalize and promote this theory, in effect, calling for the policy of millions of people to become infected with the disease and to have death on a massive scale.
So what is the theoretical justification being put forth for such a policy?
Well, the proponents of this theory argue that when something like 50 to 70% of the population becomes infected with COVID-19, the rate of transmission will slow, and theoretically the disease would not start raging through the population in the same way that it currently is. But the justification for that they put forward is that simply containing it really can't be justified economically. They say it would cost too much, measures such as lockdowns, enforced social distancing, and they don't really talk about this, but the public health measures necessary to contain and eradicate the disease are simply too expensive from the standpoint of capitalism.
Isn't the argument really being made that this will be better for everyone in the long term, that allowing a large percentage of the population to become infected will somehow provide immunity for the entire population, and thus the crisis will be over with sooner? Perhaps it will mean that we're rid of this whole crisis much sooner and it would be actually better.
Well, Zach, there's a few things that need to be kept in mind, and in particular, a number of developments over the past week that shed light on what this policy actually is. First of all, last week, Anthony Fauci, testifying before Congress, clarified that immunity to COVID-19, and especially long-term immunity, is simply theoretical at this point. It hasn't been proven. And that backs up the warnings of the World Health Organization that, again, immunity to COVID-19 is not proven. So that means that this policy would be gambling with the lives of millions of people. Moreover, a number of studies have come out last week indicating that even in areas with the highest rates of infection with COVID-19, only a tiny fraction of the population actually has antibodies to the disease. In Spain, which has the highest rate of infection per capita of any large country, the fact is that only 5% of the population was found to have antibodies. In Spain, over 25,000 people have died. So that means that in order to achieve a purely notional herd immunity, you would have to have more than 250,000 people die. In the United States, with its much larger population, that would mean for 50% of the population to be infected, you'd have to have like 2 million people die. This is simply a homicidal policy. But it's justified from the standpoint of the capitalist class with the claim that it's too expensive to prevent the spread of the disease. The cost of saving lives is too high. It's not justified. And the fact is that this is just a lie. This is pseudoscientific garbage. The World Health Organization has repeatedly made clear that COVID-19 can be contained through public health measures like testing, quarantine, and contact tracing, and lives can be saved.
So could you speak about that? What would actually be necessary to contain this disease?
COVID-19 is a respiratory disease that can be contained through standard public health measures, testing, quarantine, contact tracing. But the fact is, in order to contain this disease, it requires a massive investment in public health infrastructure, and it requires that the closure of businesses be maintained until this infrastructure is in place. There has to be a massive infrastructure of contact tracing in the United States to follow up on everyone who has tested positive Everyone who has tested positive has to be put safely into isolation in order to prevent them from spreading the disease. People who are sick have to be kept home. And workplaces, which are massive centers for the spread of the disease, have to be closed until such measures are put in place. Workers have to demand a massive public health response to contain and eradicate COVID-19, that all non-essential workplaces that are a danger for spreading COVID-19 have to remain closed.
So why is this policy being pushed right now?
These policies of herd immunity and similar pseudoscience are all being used to justify a premature return to work and the abandonment of any policy to contain the disease. All of this is being done to increase the profitability of major corporations and in the interests of the financial oligarchy. Workers are being told to get back to work as states open up production all over the country. In Michigan, auto workers are back on the job starting Monday in plants that can become hotbeds for spreading COVID-19, just like meatpacking plants were in the previous period. Every leading expert, from Anthony Fauci to the whistleblower Rick Bright, have warned that a premature return to work risks a major resurgence of the pandemic. Ultimately, the COVID-19 pandemic is an indictment of the capitalist system. It has shown that it's completely irreconcilable with the basic needs of society. And this is a social order that must be ended, and the working class must be mobilized in order to fight it.
Well, thanks very much for being with us today, Andre.
Thank you.
And for everyone watching, you can read Andre's perspective on the World Socialist website at wsws.org.